was breaking different codes and data systems and doing data analysis against the Soviet Union. After 9/11, they took one of the programs I had done, or the back end part of it, and started to use it to spy on everybody in this country. So that was a program they created called Stellar Wind. That was separate and compartmented from the regular activity that was ongoing, because it was doing domestic spying. All the equipment was coming in, I knew something was happening, but then when the contractors I had hired came and told me what they were doing, it was clear where all the hardware was going and what they were using it to do. It was simply a different input. Instead of being foreign, it was domestic input.
Somebody told me that they can listen to what we're saying by my having this, even if it's turned off.
Yes. Here's the real grand design. Every domain, think of a domain as an activity, a specific type of activity, phone calls, or banking is another domain. So if you think of graphing each domain, and then each graph, then turning it in the third dimension, the trick now is to map through all the domains in that third dimension, pulling together all the attributes that any individual has in every domain, so that now I can pull your entire life together from all those domains and map it out and show your entire life over time.
Why you're not afraid?
Why should I be?
Because if what you're saying it was possible, it would be revolutionary and people would have a vested interest in preventing that from happening.
I'm too old to be afraid. I'm too old.
I'm not sure how many of you got a chance to hear Keith Alexander yesterday, the head of the NSA, talk about the NSA's activities. Bill, how do you reconcile, is there some way to reconcile General Alexander's statement that the NSA isn't keeping track of every American with the existence of a facility like the one in Utah?
NSA's charter, and it was a legitimate one, was to do foreign intelligence, and I was with that all the way, and I did the best I could in that job. Unfortunately, they took those programs that I built and turned them on you, and I'm sorry for that. I didn't intend that, but they did that.
What you're describing really is hard to reconcile with the laws as the laws are generally understood by the lawyers who work with them.
Most people are familiar with the Webster's definition of intercept. UCIT 18 has a different definition, and that's an intercept doesn't take place until it's actually listened to, until somebody puts on some earphones or actually reads some text on a screen. So you can pull in all the communications you want.
The acquisition isn't the search, the querying later on is the search. They can then keep it in their database and target after the fact by going back and conducting data mining searches afterward, in other words, to get the information that they couldn't target from the outset.
And there is another real problem. Unfortunately, the software will, once it takes in data, it will build profiles on everybody in that data. The purpose is to monitor, be able to monitor what people are doing. You build social networks for everybody. That then turns into the graph, and then you index all that data to that graph, which means you can pull out a community that gives you an outline of the life of everybody in the community. And if you carry it over time from 2001 up, you have that 10 years worth of their life that you could lay out in a timeline that involves anybody in the country. Even senators and House of Representatives, all of them. The dangers here are that we fall into something like a totalitarian state like East Germany. Well, they came in guns drawn, you know, in my house. They didn't do that to the others, but they did to me. I guess, I don't know, they thought I was probably the most dangerous of all, so I don't know. I don't know what was in their minds, okay? So, but they did that, and they came in and pointed a gun at me when I was getting out of the shower at the time, so they pointed a gun right at my old head, you know, said, hey. So, I wasn't too upset. I just said, yeah, suppose I could get dressed here. You know, they weren't intimidating me anyway, so. Tell me something that will implicate somebody in a crime, that's what they asked me. So I told them what the crime was that I knew about, and that was that George Bush, Dick Cheney, Tenet, and Hayden conspired to subvert the Constitution, the constitutional process, and any number of laws, and here's how they did it, and I explained stellar wind on my back porch to all the FBI agents who weren't cleared. So they had a problem. I created a problem for them because they had a bunch of people now who weren't cleared for a very highly classified, only because it was domestic spying, by the way, was the reason it was highly classified. They wanted to highly classify the extreme impeachable crimes that they were committing. It needs to be out in the open. We need to, as a democracy, we need to say, do we want our government doing this or not? And do we want our government to have this data or not? And if so, if we want them to have it, then what kind of controls? And they have to be a little bit more visible. It can't all be done in secret. You can't have secret interpretations of laws and run them in secret and not tell anybody. Or can't make up kill lists and not tell anybody what the criteria is for being in the kill list. This is something the KGB, the Stasi, or the Gestapo would have loved to have had about their populations. So, I mean, you know, and just because we call ourselves a democracy, right, doesn't mean we will stay that way. That's the real danger. And we, the people, may have absolutely nothing to say about it. We haven't had anything to say so far.
Tell CNN that many people within the CIA were very uncomfortable with this. So these sources say that the president wanted his CIA director, Mike Pompeo, to meet with somebody who doesn't believe it was Russia that hacked into the DNC's emails and then released them before the election, even though the U.S. intelligence community determined that it was Russia. So this person is William Binney. He's 74 years old. He worked at the NSA for 30 years. But has since become a critic. Some of the methods of the NSA he thinks are ineffective, others he thinks are maybe too effective and are essentially spying on Americans. So his theory is that the DNC hack was an inside job. It was a DNC employee. However, he's basing this theory on questions that were raised over certain things like the speed at which one of the archives was created that was then released by the hacker Guccifer 2.0. But this theory has had many holes poked in it by other analysts. Binney also is a frequent guest on RT, Russia Today, which is considered by the U.S. government to be Russian state propaganda. So in this meeting that lasted about an hour, Binney says that Pompeo told him, "The president told me I should talk to you," and that Binney said the entire intelligence community needs to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Now the CIA has released a statement saying that CIA Director Mike Pompeo stands by and has always stood by the intelligence community's assessment about Russian hacking. However, Binney also told CNN that in this meeting, Pompeo wants Binney to meet with other people in the FBI and the NSA. So where is this going from here? Why this kind of other investigation or looking into other theories? The White House so far has not responded.
Michelle, thank you for the reporting. With us now, Steve Hall, CNN national security analyst, retired CIA chief of Russia operations. All of that reporting is significant. It is pretty shocking. The fact that the meeting began with Pompeo saying, "You're here because the president wanted me to meet with you." Why does this matter so much?
Well, one thing it does, Poppy, is it really highlights the difficult position that Pompeo is in as director of CIA. Any director of CIA has to maintain a very close relationship with the president. He has to maintain the president's ear. If he doesn't, he really loses a lot in terms of just his ability to impact things and his ability to forward the information. So even if he didn't want to meet with this Binney character, apparently he's got the president saying, "No, I would really like you to." And, unless he wants to basically sacrifice his power and as director of CIA, his ability to convey good intelligence in the future, he kind of has to do that. That's a very difficult position for any CIA director to be in, frankly.
So what message does it send, though, to those in the intelligence service that Mike Pompeo, the director, is meeting with this guy who says it wasn't the Russians, when all of their analysis, the reports that they have put out, says we do think it's the Russians? So what do the rank and file think?
I can tell you, having worked at CIA for 30 years, the analysts that we have at CIA, and indeed across the intelligence community, but a specific concentration of them at CIA, are incredibly professional. And there's a lot of them who have committed really pretty much their entire careers to doing things like Russia and Russia cyber and so forth. I don't think those people are particularly threatened by the fact that that the director of CIA, at the president's request, had to meet with this kind of fringe guy. So I don't think that's a big impact on them. But just the comparison between those two sources of information, you've got these, again, an incredible depth of information and intelligence prowess and expertise in our analysts. And then you get this one fringe guy who says, well, I've got this thing. I think it speaks more to what the president is trying to get through than it does, what CIA is producing.
But Steve, let me ask you this. I mean, it's not, our reporting is not that Pompeo just said, well, thank you for your time. See you soon, or never. He actually ended the meeting by saying, I think you should meet with the FBI and the NSA as well. I mean, doesn't that counter?
I think that gets back to that first tension that I was referring to, where you've got you got Mike Pompeo. First of all, politically he's more in Trump's camp. He's a Republican, so he can't just blow the president off. And I think he's also perhaps inclined to say, okay, let's give this a little bit further, but a little further thinking on it. But it really is sort of like, by way of analogy, if you have some horrible disease, you don't want to check with your next door neighbor or the guy down the block who says he knows something about this disease and what do you think, just so that you can get all sides. No, you're going to go to a major clinic, you're going to go to a big hospital that has expertise, years and years of it in this type of thing, and really to do anything else is somewhat of a distraction. And I think there's other reasons for why the director is would say, yeah, let's go talk to other parts of the intelligence community with this frankly fringe theory.
Steve Hall, very interesting. Thanks so much.
Sure.
We began today at the APAC International Summit in Vietnam, where President Trump met briefly with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the weekend. Putin assured Trump that Russia did not interfere with the 2016 election. Trump responded by saying he believes that Putin meant it, but shortly thereafter, Trump changed his comments to, quote, I'm with our agencies. I believe in our intelligence agencies, referring to the accusations made by U.S. intelligence agencies that Russia interfered with the U.S. election. To discuss this further, we are now joined by former CIA analyst Ray McGovern and NSA veteran and whistleblower Bill Binney. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. I'm going to start with you, Ray. And your recent essay mocking Trump doesn't prove Russia's guilty. You described how the U.S. political establishment and media was outraged that President Trump would actually believe Putin over his own intelligence agencies. But if our own agencies have not produced concrete evidence of Russian hacking, Ray, why should Trump believe them?
Well, it was one of those ha-ha-ha moments. How could you believe Trump? How could you believe Putin? How could you believe that Trump believed Putin? This headline said this was unconscionable that you could believe either of them on anything. I'd like to finish your little quote from what Trump said later. He didn't say he has trust in the U.S. intelligence agencies. He finished that clause by saying, as presently constituted. That's a big difference. What he did was accuse the former leaders of our intelligence agencies, Brennan and others, including Comey, as being political hacks. So that's the hack story, folks. What Trump called these people were political hacks, and he knows that because of my colleague Bill Binney. I had a chance to brief the director of the Central Intelligence Agency and tell him about the forensic, I repeat, forensic evidence, the investigations that for some reason FBI Director Comey forgot to do or didn't want to do of the DNC computers, which shows there wasn't a hack by Russia or by anybody else. It was a copy onto a external storage device. That's why there's this big furor going on. The press is again advancing this notion that the Russians hacked, and of course you can't believe the Russians, and if you believe the Russians, how can anyone else be believed? All this without any tangible evidence that Russia hacked.
Bill, let's turn to you now. You've said with great confidence numerous times that the alleged hack of the DNC was actually a leak, most likely from a disgruntled insider. Now, have you ever seen any concrete proof of a hack provided by U.S. intelligence agencies?
No, I've not, and I don't. Nobody's ever presented evidence to me. I mean, I would be willing to look at any evidence, but no one's come up with any. So, certainly nothing to look at. All I hear from them is the Russians did it, the Russians did it, the Russians did it. That's all they're saying, and expecting people to believe something without having any fundamental base for it, simply by repeating it over and over again. That's an old sophistic technique of convincing people that something is true.
Ray, you pointed out that even the New York Times correspondent Scott Shane wrote, quote, "What is missing from the public report is what many Americans most eagerly anticipated. Hard evidence to back up the agency's claims that the Russian government engineered the election attack instead." Now, the message from the agencies essentially amounts to trust us. So what does this tell us about the agenda of these intelligence agencies?
Well, actually, you have to sort of be a researcher. You have to go back at least 6 months to figure out what's going to happen. Now, Scott Shane said that on the 7th of January, on the 6th came out this magnificent memorandum prepared not by 17 intelligence agencies, not by 3 intelligence agencies, by hand-picked analysts from 3 intelligence agencies, and there was no evidence in it. So what Scott Shane is saying on the next day is, you know, what we all hoped for was some evidence that the Russians hacked, and there ain't none. And so for people to go back to that now and say, oh, but Trump is contradicting the opinion of his intelligence officers, well, he's pouring some doubt on that. Why? As any conscionable person would do, they're looking for evidence to support these charges. And I have to say that that 6 January memorandum from the FBI, NSA, and CIA was an embarrassment to any intelligence professional, particularly those engaged in nonpartisan analysis.
Bill, why is improving relations with Russia? Why does it appear that it's such a big threat to the U.S. political establishment when normalizing relations would actually be in the interest of both the American people and the Russian people?
Well, I think it's basically because they want to create another Cold War, have another continuing conflict or cold-type conflict, so they can invest more trillions of dollars into the military-industrial intelligence governmental complex, so that basically they can fleece us and swindle us out of more money.
Bill, let's stay with you.
I think that's the drive. Yeah, I think that's what they're after.
All right, Bill, I want to stay with you. You met with CIA Director Mike Pompeo last week. I'm interested to know, how did Pompeo react to your conclusion that the available evidence does not conform to the current CIA narrative that Russia hacked the election?
Well, I think he asked what facts I had, and I basically gave him everything I could tell him about the factual evidence we did have, and about the trying. We also were trying to transfer data at a very high rate across the Atlantic. We had people here who would set up the database, and had people in Europe attempt to draw the data across. We also had people try to push the data from one data center in New Jersey to a data center in the UK, and they got the maximum was roughly 1/4 of what it would be necessary to transfer the data set, just the data, not counting the housekeeping. So it really was somewhere between 1/4 and 1/8 the capacity necessary to transfer the data at the rate it was downloaded from what's so-called DNC servers. Now, what that simply meant to us was that the network could not manage that kind of transfer, and so the download was local. And also, we pointed out that the download rate was compatible with a USB thumb drive, but it was not capable of going across the internet.
Ray, you compared the faulty intelligence used to justify the U.S. invasion of Iraq with the questionable intelligence now being used to justify aggression against Russia and even RT itself. So what is the big lesson here for the American people?
You can't trust your government is really the key. Yeah. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, Bill.
I'm sorry.
No, the question really here, no. What I would say is that when you have people like John Brennan and James Clapper, who played a distinctive role in disguising the evidence that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and then it participated in the torture and the surveillance and all this other stuff, when you have them on the mainstream media channels saying, oh, watch out, the Russians are after us again, and Clapper saying, the Russians are almost genetically determined to be really bad actors. Well, you know, that's the level of intelligence, in that sense, intelligence you have in the intelligence agencies. And unless you clean out that strata of nincompoops and also careerists, then the poor people who are trying to do an honest job in the bowels of these agencies will never see light.
Ray and Bill, I want to address this next question to you both. RT America, it's been forced to register as a foreign agent under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or called FARA. So why do you feel RT is being singled out for the state censorship, and what does this mean for the First Amendment? Bill, you can go ahead and answer first.
Well, I think it's just it's a slap at the First Amendment. I mean, we here in America, we're always proud of having free speech, and meaning that we weren't going to suppress any kind of comments by anybody, even if we didn't like them. That was the whole fundamental principle of the First Amendment. Well, now this is pretty much a slap in the face. I mean, if we're going to have TV stations like RT, who are funded by the Russians, why aren't we going to force BBC or other countries, TV stations that are funded by countries, to register also? I mean, we have no consistency in this, except we're selectively suppressing any kind of speech. And that, to me, is a direct violation of our First Amendment in the Constitution.
Ray, we have about a minute left. You can go ahead and get the final word.
Well, thanks. No, I just cite this program here. Bill, if you say things like that, you will never be let on what's called the mainstream media, nor will I. Do Americans deserve to hear what we have to say? Well, our combined experience in the intelligence world is something like 50 years or more. Now, one thing I'd just point out is distinctive about RT. I have to admit this, okay? And that is this, that RT has never asked me for a pre-interview interview. Now, CBS, ABC, NBC, Al Jazeera, they all say, can we figure out what you're going to say, Mr. McGovern? Would you tell us what you're going to say? In other words, and sometimes BBC said, oh, we don't need to hear that. We have somebody else, okay? RT has never asked me, what's your gloss on this? What would you say about this? All they do is say, here's the link, Mr. McGovern. We know you might know something about it. Please come on. That's distinctive, and that's why I'd rejoice in being asked to at least talk to the people who are smart enough to watch RT.
All right, thank you both. We're going to leave it right there. That's Ray McGovern, former CIA analyst, and Bill Binney, NSA whistleblower. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So, look, this is a good day for the president. It's a very, very bad day for CNN. I have to tell you, there should be hanging their head in shame when you think about how many people went out on a limb and predicted there would be indictments for obstruction, there would be indictments for collusion, there would be indictments for this and for that. They made it seem like it was an open and shut case, and they misinformed the American public. And they have to have some public accountability when you say things that turn out not to be true. Look, I've been vindicated. I've been saying this from day one and been criticized and condemned for simply doing a legal analysis that I think any reasonable, objective, nonpartisan lawyer would have done, would have come to the same conclusion I came to, and essentially the conclusion that was come to today by the Attorney General.
All right, Professor Alan Dershowitz, always great to have your insights. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.